So we'll start the second half of the 9/11 conspiracy theory documentary. If anyone is actually having being convinced,
over 100
let me know, leave a
uncontrolled
comment.
fires in skyscrapers in the last 50 years.
Let me know
and
which
never
part
has
won
one
you over.
collapsed or come close to collapsing from fire. Only earthquakes and demolitions have brought these
I was
modern
banned for
structures
4
down.
years.
Then we look at the fires in Building 7, and they would be called moderate by any firefighting manual, but still the building collapsed. Building 7 had sporadic fires in it for 6 hours. Other skyscrapers, as we mentioned, have burned for days or even weeks. Why don't they collapse? Because steel doesn't begin to weaken until after 2,000 degrees of temperature. Around 2,500 it becomes red hot, and at around 3,000 degrees starts to melt. Another example of this was the Windsor building in Madrid, Spain, in mid-February of 2005.
Of course.
It burned for 2 days at temperatures much higher, with white-hot flames
2 days.
shooting out of it for hundreds of feet. As we watched the Windsor building burn, I was amazed to watch the media of the world say, well, the World Trade Center towers in Building 7 fell from fire, so it's going to fall. We're just waiting for the collapse. But the collapse never came. All the major support pillars held fast. Steel doesn't melt at that temperature. According to official reports, Building 7 wasn't even in the
Something
debris
like
field
that.
of Tower 1 and 2. And that's why it's important to look at buildings like Bankers Trust. We already talked about it earlier, but let's focus in on it with some detail. It was right up against the South Tower, only about 45 feet away, and large chunks of the South Tower
I think it was
fell
actually
directly
for
in
either
to
a
Bankers
content
Trust.
ID
But Bankers
or
Trust
they said
is
I
like all other modern
threatened
steel
somebody.
buildings. It's like the big building in Madrid, Spain. Despite the fact that fires raged through many of its floors and that huge pieces of debris fell on top of it and up against it, it didn't collapse. The architect of the World Trade Center towers, Nomura Yamasaki, told the press many times before 9/11 that he specifically designed the towers to take massive passenger jetliner impacts. The construction and project manager for the World Trade Center complex,
Wow.
Frank DiMartini, told the press multiple times that they designed the towers not to just take one large jetliner impact, but at least two, and not collapse. And other world-renowned
gosh,
engineers
then
and
you'd have to send
architects
3
went public
planes
as
to get
well.
the job done.
But that didn't matter for the mainstream
that
media.
point,
They simply
why
ignored
bother?
their protest. Senior firefighter Lou Caccioli, who survived the collapse of the World Trade Centers, reported that bombs were clearly going off inside the structure. He told People magazine this the day after 9/11. When we spoke to him, he said he couldn't talk about it. Professor Van
When we talked to
Ramiro,
him, he
Vice
said he
President for
wouldn't talk to
Research
us.
at New Mexico Institute of Mining and Technology, told the Albuquerque Journal that the implosions of the towers were too mathematical to be a chance result of airplanes, and that only controlled demolitions could have brought the buildings down. Then Kevin Ryan, an executive
Mr.
engineer with
DiMartini
Underwriters
himself
Laboratories,
said that
or
it was
UL,
designed to
certifies
take
most big
multiple
buildings in America,
loads.
went public and said,
Not just one
it's
load, but at
impossible.
least
Jet
two
fuel wouldn't have melted the
large
columns in Tower 1 and 2.
passenger-sized loads.
This is from the organization that underwrote the towers. Then
Half-baked
Firefighter
farce.
Engineering, the oldest engineering publication in United States history, went public and said, there's no way jet fuel made that happen. And stop hauling away the debris. Stop
Look at
covering
the title,
up the crime
Burning
scene.
Questions.
We've got 7 different tapes showing different groups of firefighters saying the towers looked like they were brought down by bombs and that they heard explosions. But in the interest of time, here is just one of those clips shot by 2 French brothers who were making a documentary about New York firefighters on the morning of 9/11.
We came down. It was much worse than it was when we went
That's
up.
actually a pretty good documentary. We should watch
Right?
that on here sometime.
We went up and they had everything set up. We came down. It was desolate. It was like holy.
We came down to the lobby. It was like the first thing the wars. There was nobody there. What do we do? We made it outside. We made it about a block.
We made it at least 2 blocks, and we started running. Floor by floor instead of popping out.
It was like it was if they had detonated.
Yeah,
If they were
detonated,
planned to
yeah.
take down a building. Boom, 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 boom.
NBC's Pat Dawson is close to the scene of that attack. Pat,
Matt,
can you hear me?
if we are, yes, I can, Matt. Just moments ago, I spoke to the chief of safety for the New York City Fire Department, who was obviously one of the first people here on the scene after those 2 planes were crashed into the side, we assume, of the World Trade Center towers, which used to be behind me over there. Chief Albert Turry told me that he was here just literally 10 or 15 minutes after the events that took place this morning. That is the first crash. He had roughly 10 alarms, roughly 200 men in the building trying to effect rescues of some of those civilians who were in there, and that basically he received word of the possibility of a secondary device, that is another bomb going off. He tried to get his men out as quickly as he could, but he said that there was another explosion which took place, and then an hour after the first hit here, with the first crash that took place, he said, there was another explosion that took place in one of the towers here. So obviously, according to his theory, he thinks that there were actually devices that were planted in the building. The second device he speculates, was probably planted in the building. So that's what we have been told by Albert Turry, who is the chief of safety for the New York City Fire Department. He told me that just moments ago.
And a CBS News chopper in the air over the towers reported the same thing.
If Jim Smith is with us still in chopper 2, Jimmy, you there?
Just we saw some kind of explosion, a lot of smoke come out at the top of the tower, and then it collapsed down onto the streets below, much like we saw the first tower just about a half hour ago.
Chopper 2 as he takes these pictures. Jim?
Yes, I am here.
Jim, tell us what's happening out there.
We just witnessed some kind of secondary follow-up explosion on the World Trade Center #2 in the wall.
Secondary.
We've all unfortunately seen the famous photos of victims jumping out of Tower 1 and 2.
Earlier in the documentary, he talked about Bill Silverstein, or whatever that guy's name was, that he had taken out. Oh man, what an unfortunate pause as this person falls out of the building. He said that Silverstein had taken out insurance close to the time of the attacks, and Snopes actually says that that's partially true, and that most of their assertion as far as the partially is how heavily what ifs play into it if you're going to take it beyond that. Yeah, he changed the insurance policy shortly before. So I mean, that it looks like that part is true, but then you have to believe that it was done for XYZ reason, or that he didn't already have a certain level of protection already.
But that happened in 15 minutes while the jet fuel was still burning. Later, we have the photographs of the victims standing in the impact holes from the aircraft begging for help for 20 to 30 minutes. How could they survive heat that would melt through giant 4-foot steel girders? The answer is they couldn't. And the firefighters are on record as saying the fires were almost out. The fact is, the temperatures had dropped dramatically. The fires were almost extinguished. The people were in the open wounds in the sides of the buildings begging for help. Help that did come in the form of the valiant firefighters who had the buildings blown up around them. The tape you're about to hear is from the grave, as a valiant firefighter reports that the fires were almost out. And as firefighters went public and said that the fires had almost been extinguished, the federal government ordered them under national security to stop talking to the public and told the media that all the firefighter tapes had malfunctioned, but not before firefighters had rebelled and released segments of tape, a segment you're about to hear.
What do you got up there, Chief? I'm still in voice stairway, 74th floor, no smoke or fire problem. The walls are breached, so be careful. Yeah, 10-4, I saw that on 68. Freddie, come on over. Freddie, come on over by us.
Yeah, it is.
I got it first
you know, with 20-some years of
isolated pockets of fire.
time passing,
We should be able to
to
knock
look
it down
back
with 2
on
lines.
I wasn't a kid, but
78th floor, number
I was pretty
1045 code orange.
it would have been 22 maybe.
Seconds before the towers collapsed, blast points could be seen springing up down the
I
sides
was
of the
like
buildings
just
from
starting
the top
my life.
down.
Like
Within
my
days of 9/11,
independent
Bush
of
and
my
his
parents.
minions began grandstanding at Ground Zero, telling us, give up
We,
your liberties
the
and we'll
people.
protect you. Go along with our invasion of the world and everything will be okay.
All
Then
these
there were all the
poses are great.
pre-9/11 warnings from the French, the British, the Egyptians, the Italians, the Russians, the Israelis, the Indians. The list goes on and on, but Condoleezza Rice and George Bush told us they'd never heard of such a plan of al-CIA to fly hijacked jets into the World Trade Center and Pentagon. It didn't matter if CNN had reported on it back in 1995. Even the Taliban, 2 months before 9/11, said, "Stop Osama, he's about to attack you." What they didn't know is he was working for Mr. Bush.
I want to add that, the president knew about a month in advance before we were attacked here in New York.
He got the memo.
Yeah, he didn't do anything about it. And we all know that. Now he's here in New York in the convention, and he's going to be applauded by, thousands and thousands of people. This is ridiculous.
Howard Dean recently
there
seemed
was like
to
a
use aloud
legitimate concern
whether you had
among
advanced
like
knowledge of
people
9/11.
that I
Do you
knew
agree
that
or
there was
disagree
going to
with
be
the
like a
RNC
draft.
that this kind of
and
rhetoric borders on political hate speech?
It just seemed like anything
Look,
could
there's time
happen.
for politics. And, it's time for politics. And,
Luciferians are throwing their evil hand signal all over the news, rubbing it in the
Some
faces
sort of
of
insinuation.
ordinary, hardworking patriots like ourselves.
Follow up on something unrelated.
Let's talk about motives. The Project for New American Century, founded back in 1996 by 25 neocons, Dick Cheney, Jeb Bush, Paul Wolfowitz, all of these people said on their own website, in publications, we need, quote, helpful Pearl Harbor events. I don't think Pearl Harbor was helpful, but we need a terrorist attack on the order of Pearl Harbor to get the American people behind a war. The globalists took a baseball bat, and we're a beehive. America's a beehive, the sleeping giant. And they took that baseball bat, and they went, ooh, terrorists got you, bam! Hey, bees, the terrorist over there, go get our oil for us. And we all came out of the hive. And now we kind of settled back down, so they keep waving the bat going, well, I don't want to hurt our bees too bad, but we may have to whack them again to get them behind what we're doing. All right, terrorists going to get you. Terrorists going to get you. Give up your rights to us. How many of you know that NORAD stood down for over an hour and 25 minutes, but if your Cessna gets off course for 5 minutes, they're going to launch F-16s on you. Remember Payne Stewart, the golfer? 15 minutes after his jet got off track, they had F-16s all around him. But on 9/11, in the most controlled airspace in the world, they could do nothing about 4 jets. But it gets worse. Guess why NORAD stood down? The average people in the military are good folks. They were told it was a drill, because the Associated Press reported, and the CIA's own website admits, that on the morning of 9/11, the CIA was running a drill of flying hijacked jets into the World Trade Center and Pentagon. It was just a coincidence. At 8:30 in the morning, there was a drill of the exact same thing happening, and so NORAD stood down. Anybody know what problem, reaction, solution is? Create a crisis to scare the people into submission. They're begging for help, and you take their rights. Does anybody know what Hitler did? Right after he got elected, he firebombed his own Reichstag building. And then he said the communists did it. And they had a mass wave of arrest and took people's rights and set up Reich Security or Homeland Security.
Benefit from there being unrest and
the North American Aerospace Defense Command is charged with defending North America's airspace. On the morning of September 11th, 2001, Vice President Dick Cheney was in control of NORAD. This was the first time in U.S. history that a president or vice president was in direct control of the military agency. NORAD was founded in 1957, and generals always had the power to shoot down or intercept hijacked aircraft. But on June 1st, 2001, just 3 months before 9/11, Dick Cheney ordered Donald Rumsfeld, to allow him to take control of NORAD itself and the shoot-down procedure and remove that power from the generals so they could do nothing. Here is a copy of the memorandum from Rumsfeld to the Joint Chiefs, telling them they no longer have any authority. An Associated Press article in August of 2002 reported that the CIA just so happened to be running a drill on the morning of 9/11 of flying jets in the World Trade Center and Pentagon. Then senior FAA officials ordered air traffic controllers to shred the tapes from 9/11 in violation of federal law. AP learned of the drills because at a Homeland Security function after 9/11, they bragged about it. Oh, we had foresight. We were running drills that very morning. Then USA Today reported that drills held weeks before 9/11 included targets that were the Pentagon and World Trade Center.
Don't just look at me. Take the damn paper, read it, get informed. We were undefended on 9/11. They're still in power. They're sitting there eating filet mignon. People are losing their jobs every day. We've got a bullshit war in Iraq. Who took responsibility for 9/11?
Shouldn't we reward them for doing a bad job? I mean,
Yeah, we should reward them.
Bushes, we should thank him for the job he did.
The way you reward traitors is how we should reward them.
But he says he's done a great job. And
what he says, I know what he did.
Dick Cheney
ran and hid in a hole in Nebraska. I get fired if I make a typo in a letter, okay? I get fired for that. Instead, we've still got Rumsfeld, we've got Condoleezza Rice, we've got Dick Cheney, we've got all the same criminals. They're criminals because they allowed this to happen. 4 planes in 2 hours. How can that be? Only 14 planes guarding the entire East Coast. I say bullshit. Complete bullshit. Wow. We know this is the greatest country on earth. We have the biggest military on the planet. How can it be 4 planes in 2 hours? Do the math.
One of the biggest holes in their argument is the fact that they never heard of a plan.
Look at this setup. Wow, it feels so archaic, but it's like, it's only it's less than 20 years ago. Wow. You got the reel-to-reels, old school board, the old school monitor. And what would he say? Pay close attention to right over Alex's shoulder, you'll see a small carving of a couple of owls representing the demon lord Moloch, as worshipped in the Bohemian Grove.
To fly high jets into landmarks on the East Coast.
We're going to take a closer look tonight at another example of where, despite the conventional wisdom, there were people in the United States who actually were preparing to defend against the kind of attacks which occurred here on 9/11. The North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD for short, has been defending the skies over the U.S. and Canada for almost 50 years, 46 to be precise. USA Today reports that in the 2 years before the attacks on September the 11th, NORAD conducted exercises using hijacked airliners as weapons.
We watched the Bohemian Grove documentary a little while back.
We knew he hated us. But there was nobody in our government, at least, and I don't think the prior government could envision flying airplanes into buildings on such a massive scale.
But that turns out not to be true. U.S. military planners did envision and practice those very scenarios. As reported by USA Today, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, conducted exercises with fighter jets, simulating hijacked planes flown into the World Trade Center in the 2 years before the attacks.
And so then I saw Condoleezza Rice get up on TV and say, we had never thought, we had never heard. Why, that's a ridiculous conspiracy theory to say that.
Pentagon planners also envisioned the attack on the Pentagon 5 months before it happened.
The Pentagon had a drill in November of 2000 simulating a hijacked jet being flown to the Pentagon. So between all the drills before 9/11 and the drill in the morning of 9/11, air traffic controllers thought that it was a simulation.
Hijacked aircraft headed towards New York. Is this real world or exercise? No, this is not an exercise, I'm going to test.
And now respected rescue workers who worked the World Trade Center site say that they found 3 of the 4 data recorders and were ordered to load them on FBI vehicles and keep their mouths shut. Why would the feds want to cover up what was on those recorders? Thousands of years ago, when a crime was committed in Rome, The judges would ask one question, qui bono, or who stands to gain, who profits? And when we look at 9/11, the answer is clear. Let's look at what the Bush family was doing in the days before 9/11 and on 9/11, and it's quite revealing. Marvin Bush was in New York City running security for the World Trade Center complex. Former President Bush was in D.C. at the Ritz-Carlton for a Carlyle Group function, sitting at the head table with the head of the bin Laden family. 2 days before 9/11, Governor of Florida, Jeb Bush, declared unprecedented martial law in Florida. He didn't make the announcement until September 11th. Then we have the CIA-controlled head of Pakistani intelligence, General Ahmad Ahmed, arriving in Washington, D.C. on September 13th, just days after he wired, the New York Times admits, $100,000 to the supposed lead hijacker, Mohammed Atta. For the week he was here, preceding 9/11, he met with CIA Director George Tenet, the heads of the House and Senate Intelligence Committees, Porter Goss and Senator Graham. By the way, Porter Goss has now been made head of the CIA. On the morning of 9/11, he was actually having breakfast with Senator Bob Graham and Porter Goss. What is the money man behind Mohammed Atta doing meeting with all the intelligence heads? In the days after 9/11, the public was told that we were going to be able to catch whoever was behind September 11th because they had engaged in record put options against American and United Airlines. But when the money trail led back to CIA-controlled companies headed up by people like Buzzy Krongard, number 3 at the CIA, the story was dropped like a hot potato. But that doesn't stop Buzzy from still going public and defending people like Osama bin Laden. He's told the Times of London and many other publications that we should just leave Osama bin Laden alone. Let him go free, that we've got a problem if we want to capture him. Prominent people across the world have been exposing the 9/11 coverage. Michael Meacher, the number 3 man in the Blair government, wrote a huge editorial for the London Guardian titled "The War on Terror is Bogus," and he pointed out that NORAD stood down on 9/11. He wrote about the Project for a New American Century, run by Jeb Bush and Dick Cheney, years before 9/11, saying that they needed a helpful terrorist attack to get the American people behind their war for empire. Meacher concluded his article by saying, if the U.S. government didn't engineer the attacks, they certainly knew about it. Andres von Bülow was German defense minister and German technology minister. I interviewed him on my syndicated radio program, and he said there's no way Al-Qaeda carried out these attacks. Only the military-industrial complex could pull it off. But here's one of the biggest pieces of evidence. You all heard them say that a paper passport fell out of one of the towers and was picked up by a police officer on the street. This plane flies into the building, explodes with jet fuel out of the guy's jacket, goes through the fireball, through the side of the plane, out of the burning building, out of the fire shooting out, and comes down to the ground unscathed. But something happened. For 6 months, they reported they had this passport. Boy, we've got it. We've got the proof. And then the guy stood up and was alive in the Middle East, and they pulled it and said, oh, that was a mistake. He wasn't a hijacker, and the story just disappeared of the passport. Because believe me, this establishment could care less about you. The EPA found all the asbestos. The EPA, guys, said that there was asbestos and people were getting sick, and there was going to be $90 million for the police and firefighters for medical treatment. And Bush came in and had that blocked. Now that's mainstream news. And now of the 14 search and rescue dogs, 8 of them have died from cancer. In summation, it's important to note that we only covered a tiny portion of the facts and evidence that clearly shows that 9/11 was an inside job. Number one, the official story of 9/11 has been completely disproven. At every point, we've caught them lying, manufacturing evidence, or covering up evidence. From high-level government inside sources and publicly available facts, we now have a very clear picture of how 9/11 was carried out. Number one, we know that the men who were on board the aircraft, who were supposedly the hijackers, had their houses, cars, credit cards paid for by the U.S. government. They were, in truth, agents, taking part in drills and nothing more. Supposed computer malfunctions at American and United ensured that all 4 planes only had 20% occupancy on board. On a day when flights on the East Coast were an average of 80% full. Once the decoys, known as hijackers, were on board the planes, a gas was released, knocking out the occupants of the aircraft. Then a small criminal group, in control of remote control systems patented for over 20 years, took control of the aircraft and flew them into the World Trade Centers and Pentagon. The CIA-controlled drills that morning confused NORAD for over an hour until it was almost too late for them to shoot down the hijacked planes. I said almost too late. When they did find out, Dick Cheney wouldn't let the planes fly over 350 miles an hour, so 3 of the aircraft were able to hit their targets. The 4th wasn't able to because our sources in the Pentagon have told us generals didn't follow their orders and had Flight 93 shot down. If it would have hit its target, the Capitol, the government would have been completely decapitated and the president could have declared total martial law. By the grace of God, everything didn't go as planned.
Whoa.
And so now the globalists have spent the last 3.5 years
Whoa.
trying to...
Whoa. Hold on a second. So he's saying that that first of all that one was shot down, not purposefully taken down by its passengers, which is the accepted story, and that if it would have hit the Pentagon, then Bush would have declared complete martial law. I don't think so. Or if it would have not hit the Pentagon, but if it would have hit where was that one going? The White House, did he say? Because the one at the Pentagon kind of didn't hit, I don't think, like they wanted it to. But the one that went down, where was it headed to? I think the White House. Maybe we'll find out.
Cover up the sloppy job they did on 9/11. They're counting on the public not being able to face the horror of what really took place so they can carry out another, even more devastating attack and finish the job they started, enslaving America and using the country as an engine to take over the planet. The only thing that can stop them now is the American people having the courage to face the truth about 9/11 and to expose it. If we don't, they're going to continue to use problem, reaction, solution. And it's going to be sad to watch the American people after the next attack going to the very killers that carried it out, begging them to protect them. And it's sad to see the deaths of these 2,800 plus people being used to sell a police state in America.
Yeah,
Bush says the terrorists attacked us, whoever the terrorists are, because they hate our freedom. Well, then why is the government, period, whether it's George Bush or John Kerry, trying to kill our freedoms? America isn't America if we don't have these God-given freedoms. That's why this country is loved. No, now we're being forged into a tool of global empire to be launched against sovereign, innocent nations that we know had nothing to do with 9/11.
The Republicans are here and taking advantage of the 3,000 people that died right behind me for their own selfish politics, and it's very sad. I cried here for the first time today. I come here all the time. I've never cried here before. For some reason, I cried for the future because the way they're exploiting these dead people.
Because in your guts, you know that the criminals are returning to the scene of the crime to gloat and to use the bloody sacrifice they committed.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
So now Bush is here in the Big Apple, using the deaths as an attempt to get reelected.
September 11th. September 11th, men armed with knives, armed with chemical, biological, or even nuclear weapons. The fanatics who terrorist killers, September 11th, terrorists of Al-Qaeda, terrorists, Taliban, nuclear weapons, terrorists. 9/11 terror. My fellow Americans, we have already been attacked. Terror, terrorist, evil.
September 11th, in those days after the towers fell.
September 11th. September 11th, ground zero. And suddenly the streets were full of sirens and there was fire in the sky. Terrorism, September 11th. Osama bin Laden declared war on America. September 11th, terrorists, a walking, talking weapon of mass destruction.
Barbaric terrorists, terrorists or terrorism. September 11th, September 11th. The terrorists, war and danger. September 11th, September 11th, terrorism, global terrorism, the horror. Terrorism, terrorists. Terrorists, 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 the terrorists. Terrorists, terrorist, terrorism. September 11th, global terrorism, terrorism. Terrorism. September 11th, world terrorism, terrorism. Terrorism, 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 terrorists. September 11th. threat of global terrorism,
YouTube video to fall asleep to?
global terrorism, September 11, 2001, global terrorism. Terrorist, global terrorism, terrorist, September 11th,
Terrorism, the attack on our homeland, back from the attack on our economy, and back from the attack on our way of life. Terrorism, terrorists, hate. We must be fierce and relentless and terminate terrorism. Terrorists, you defeat them. It yearns to destroy not just the individual, but the entire international order. That's why America is safer with George W. Bush as president.
September 11th, terrorism, September 11th. Terrorism, terrorists, September 11th.
Terror, terrorist.
Terror, September 11th. Threat, tyranny, terrorist tyranny, tyranny. People hate us.
Terrorism, September the 11th. Terror,
This is really bizarre to me.
Weapons of mass destruction. September the 11th. September the 11th. Terrorists. The evil terrorists.
Is it technically, are you supposed to say September 11th or September the 11th?
The elite know we're restless, that we're catching on to their scam. That's why they're now using sound wave weapons that the military has used in Iraq on the streets of America. There's your LRAD, ladies and gentlemen, used against the Iraqis, used against the Palestinians, now used against us in America. We're getting reports that about this garden, they're already using them. Long before 9/11, they were getting the sound wave weapons, the microwave weapons ready, building all the emergency containment facilities. They knew all this was coming. How you doing, officer? Did you know I interviewed the CEO of this company a few years ago? Our boys are using these in Iraq, aren't they?
Ask more questions to DCPI, Commissioner Paul Brown.
I'm from Austin, Texas. Are those the guys in the white outfits? Right. Do you know what those are?
What?
Those are sound wave weapons they're using in Iraq. They can burst your eardrum.
Oh, it's because of
now they're out here to review the police. What do you think of it?
I don't know anything about it. It might be necessary, but I doubt it. I think everyone knows it's a peaceful protest. So.
Yeah, I mean, well, the point is that these are things used in Iraq against enemies, and now it's being used right here in America. Now that the government in general considers the American people enemies of the state, defense contractors have a whole new lucrative market, selling high-tech weapons normally sold to the military to the police. We're on our way to a protest that's unauthorized, not permitted. They've been arresting people by the thousands, and we're going to cover it. Of all the hundreds of huge protests we've seen, a small group broke off with a unpermitted march and is moving down towards Madison Square Garden, or MSG as New Yorkers call it. Now notice as we walk here that the roads have all been pinned conveniently ahead of the march. So tourists, anybody that's in here to be arrested, and we are now inside the pens. And look at them hurting us. Look at their cars hurting us. I wonder if it'll be like Monday night. I wonder if they'll run horses and mopeds into us.
11:35.
If you're here at 11:35, they will arrest you.
But I'm sorry.
They're hardly letting people out. They're opening up the pens a little inch to let people slowly trickle out. So they're set. And now we're getting in trouble for letting y'all know.
Well, that little story about how they're going to arrest people really worked. Look, everybody's leaving. Police then went in with barricades and broke the protest up into 4 different blocks.
That guy looks mad as hell.
And randomly arrested innocent people.
Same guy.
It was the same story over and over and over again. And police brutality was completely out of control. Reporters for Reuters, the Associated Press, student reporters, tourists, even an American Spectator reporter was arrested and taken to Pier 57. Look around you. Is being built. A high-tech, cashless society control grid. We're now going to explore the ruling elite in the world today and what their driving ideology and philosophies are. We'll also look at their minions, the people that slavishly serve them.
Let's take a special look at the minions. Somebody's
American tragedy!
Oh my God.
Well, here we are all the way from Austin, Texas, covering the Republican National Convention. What we're seeing here is Skull and Bones coronation number 2. Well, down here you can see the CNN staff, Bush Light. They love the president, put out all the propaganda. They also worship Kerry. So does Fox News when it comes to worshiping Bush. So here's the so-called mainstream media you can trust, which is nothing more than basically a CIA front to propagandize and manipulate the people. But it's all in a slick packaging with a great, impressive background, and that's what people respond to. You know what? I bet most of those so-called Texans down there from that Texas delegation aren't even first-generation Texans. They're just as phony as George W. Bush is. A guy who is from Kennebunkport, Maine, whose daddy speaks with a perfect Atlantic accent. People who were Tories back in the Revolutionary War. They came down carpetbagging to Texas when George was a little boy. And now so many Texans and phony Texans have been sucked in by this and just love the whole motif. But again, it's form over substance. It's the packaging. Yeah, I'm a slave. And I'm happy about it. I'm proud of it. I've decided to just join the New World Order. I've decided to just go along with it and have a good time. The media has really been covering Skull and Bones lately, how Bush and Kerry are both members. Are you aware of that organization?
I am not.
Does it concern you that they both were in the same fraternity in college and just 2 years apart?
No, it does not.
Just one hell of a coincidence that 15 members each year out of 290 million people, and the 2 presidential candidates are Skull and Bones.
I would say that's a coincidence.
You, sir, wearing
I would say that's a coincidence.
I don't acknowledge the existence of Skull and Bones. Taken to the asbestos line, abandoned bus.
What do you think about Bush and Kerry being cousins and members of Skull and Bones?
Excuse me?
Did you know Bush and Kerry were cousins?
Kissing cousins or what?
They really are cousins.
They really are.
There's only 15 members of Skull and Bones each year out of 290 million Americans, and both of them are Skull and Bones. Certainly you're aware of that.
Oh, well, why wouldn't you be? Talk to Bill O'Reilly. He'd have that answer. I know he would.
Well, but I'm not talking to Bill O'Reilly. What do you think? Yeah. We need to talk about it. I mean, him and Kerry are cousins. They are members of Skull and Bones.
The question is, would he be a Skull and Bones guy today? I mean, you know, people do crazy things when they're young.
Well, his dad was a Skull and Bones, and his dad. It's in politicians' autobiographies. You know, it's in the encyclopedia. And it was called the Illuminati.
I remember reading about the Illuminati in the 60s, late 60s, when Hal Lindsey came out with a book, Late Great Planet Earth, and everybody's going to get raptured and go to, you know, and so kids were walking around talking about that theory. And then the Illuminati book came out, or a number of them came out. And it was one world government, one world money system, one world religion.
This guy's
that's all coming
Alex
now.
Jones about a one world government.
Conspiracy theories never work. I mean, look at.
Well, every time I bring it up, somebody says, "Oh, you think it's a conspiracy?" No, it's a real group. I want to know what you think.
We got into not a debate, but a gal who was a real confirmed Republican. She married a real liberal guy, and the next thing you know, we have her over for dinner, and I hate Bush. And I said, "Whoa, where'd all that come from?" And she got right down to
it's like
all the things of all the presidents being involved in this society, all Masons.
I mean,
and that was her whole base. And I hate Bush. And I said,
well, then how could she hate Bush? Because Kerry's a member.
Well, that's a good question.
A lot of people aren't going to know what Skull and I don't really know what it is. I know he was a member of it. It's some secret society.
And it's so secret, I can't talk about it.
Yeah, by the way, you better watch
I don't think there's
yourself.
anything supernatural or occult about it.
You know what I'm saying? Because if there's anything to it, you're a marked man.
You guys have a good night.
Well, I'll tell you what, you're in the right place to be safe.
You were both in Skull and Bones, the secret society.
It's so secret we can't talk about it.
What does that mean for America? The conspiracy theorists are going to go wild.
I'm sure they are. I don't know. I haven't seen the web.
Number 322?
First of all, he's not the nominee. And, look, I look forward...
Are you prepared to lose?
No, I'm not going to lose.
You both were members of Skull and Bones, a secret society at Yale. What does that tell us? Not much, because it's a secret. Is there a secret handshake? Is there a secret code?
I wish there were something secret I could manifest.
322, secret number?
There are all kinds of secrets, Tim, but one thing is not
John
a secret.
Kerry,
I disagree with this president's direction.
Most people don't know the Order of Skull and Bones at Yale is simply one chapter in a larger global organization known by many as the Illuminati. Its symbol is a skull and crossbones and the number 322. Skull and Bones is the name used by the uninitiated or non-members. The true name of the organization is the Order of Death or the Order of the Death Set. George Bush and John Kerry have both been initiated in the same way. They swore an oath to the tomb, to the Order of Death above all others, and to wage eternal war against all of humanity. In April of 2001, ABC News was able to get a few minutes of video of a small portion of the ritual that's conducted outside in a courtyard. What they witnessed was macabre, chants of death equals death and devil equals death, accompanied by mock human sacrifices. President Taft was a prominent member of Skull and Bones, and in 1900, he became the first president to visit Bohemian Grove in Northern California, a satellite of Skull and Bones. For 3 generations, the Bushes have been members of Skull and Bones, and for 3 generations, they've traveled to Northern California and the Bohemian Grove. There are many prominent foreigners, like German Chancellor Helmut Schmidt, Ronald Reagan, Richard Nixon are pictured here in 1957 at the Bohemian Grove. Both men wrote about the organization in their public memoirs. Schwarzenegger is a reported visitor to the Bohemian Grove, as well as former President Jimmy Carter.
The night of the election, I was up for the first 2 seconds that the polls were open. Then all of a sudden, these explosions of votes started coming in out of nowhere. These explosions of bullshit.
While in New York, we ran into the Karl Rove of 4 administrations.
Remember
David
when
Gergen,
he was the big
top
boogeyman?
presidential advisor to Ford,
for the Republicans,
Reagan, George Herbert Walker Bush, and Bill Clinton. We couldn't believe our luck. It just so happens that David Gergen is also a prominent member of the Bohemian Grove,
a member of the
offshoot of Skull and
Bones.
Bones.
Tell you, it's a secret.
This insider of insiders, a staple of the White House.
Oh, that's the guy he confronted, remember?
Years. Got very upset when we brought up Bohemian Grove to him. He didn't deny its existence. He didn't deny that he was a member. He didn't deny the rituals. He just became angry and didn't act very gentlemanly.
I love this interview.
The real wild card here are the demonstrators. We just
Not
don't know
this
where
one,
this
the
is
one
gonna go.
Alex did with him.
While they were peaceful today, there's a lot more anger among those demonstrators than is evident. You talk
Is
to
he
them
still
today,
is Rove still doing stuff though? I guess I just don't.
Hey, Mr. Gergen, can we talk to you for a second?
Oh, here we go.
I'm Alex Jones. I have a TV show in Austin. I make documentaries. Just a few questions about the convention.
Yeah, well, is there a camera or are you?
Yeah, right there. Just about. Yeah, but I just want to get your permission first. Here.
Okay. It's local. I've got.
No, I understand. Just about a minute or two.
Okay, great.
We're talking to David Gergen, and he has advised several presidents, and of course has written quite a few books, and is I would call you a political pundit or researcher.
Commentariat, over the hill, whatever.
Okay. How long have you been in New York?
About 4 hours.
What do you think of this circus?
Well, I haven't seen all the protests yet, but I've never seen as much security for a convention as we have here. And it's, the city's almost closed down. I think it's remarkable. I think it's an unfortunate turn for politics that we have to have this many police around.
There's been a lot of news articles and reports saying that there's a heightened risk of terror attacks. Do you think that's? Do you think there's a chance of that? Or
I think. Well, listen, they just arrested, I think, or broken up some plot allegedly to somebody wanted to blow up subways. Yeah, I think it's a very real danger. And you've got Madison Square Garden is sitting right, basically on top of a train station, and Boston Convention was right on top of a train station.
Is this a new interview?
Yeah, just have to remember that trains are very accessible, vulnerable, and that's what happened in Spain. They went after trains and they blew some trains up, and it wasn't very expensive. So I think there's that danger, but I think the police are on top of it. They're treating this as a special security event, which means there's not only the obvious police around, but believe me, there's a lot of private stuff going on here.
Okay, one last question. I read a Washington Times article many years ago where you had a comment about the organization, and then now it's been in the Wall Street Journal, it's been in a lot of different newspapers, and that's the Bohemian Grove. And back in, 1996, when you joined as a Clinton advisor, the Republicans were criticizing you, oh, what about Bohemian Grove? And then you countered them by saying, hey, I don't run around in the woods naked. What did that mean?
Here is the before-mentioned Washington Times article where he said, I didn't run around naked like they do.
I don't know what quote you're referring to. I'm not aware of any quote like that. Listen,
he was walking around naked in the Bohemian Grove.
A happy member of the Bohemian Grove. I like the folks who come there, and it's really inappropriate for me to talk about the group beyond that. Thank you.
Have you been there for the ceremony with the cremation of care?
Frankly, I don't think that's something I need to talk to you about.
I just don't think we had been shown that first part of the interview before.
Have you been there for the ceremony with the cremation of care?
Frankly, I don't think that's something I need to talk to you about.
Really?
That's right.
Well, I'm Alex Jones, and I snuck in there in 2000. I'm the guy that blew it wide open and got the video. It's been on national TV.
Well, I just respect you for that.
You do?
I do.
But it's a lot of big public officials going in there. Don't we deserve to know?
I don't know anything about you, and I don't know anything about your film. But if you go in there with an understanding, you violated that understanding by releasing that film, and I don't respect you for that.
Really? But we have public officials
I'm sorry. You took an understanding when you went in there that you would not do that film. And did you have an understanding when you went in there?
No.
Did you crash it?
Yes.
Yeah, and it has no trespassing signs there too, doesn't it?
No, they put them up after.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just walked in.
I'm sorry, sir. I've been there before. I know what the circumstances are, and I'm sorry you violated the understandings. That was not a gentlemanly thing to do.
But what about the ritual? Is the ritual gentlemanly?
See, he would not say that's not a gentlemanly thing to do if he snuck in. He would tell him that was a bitch move, or he's a bastard, or whatever.
You
absolutely had
this is what's called
permission to be
ambush
there,
journalism,
in my opinion.
and I disrespect
and
you for that as well. So thank you and
by
goodbye.
releasing the video. I agree. That's probably true.
Oh,
that's right. Listen. You go around and make understandings with people and violate them. You ambush people on the streets, and that's inappropriate form of journalism. If you wish to practice that, that's fine, but don't ask others to respect you for it. If you want to, you can do. You're a free American, like anything you want. If you want to be uncivil and rude and ungentlemanly, that's up to you. But don't expect the rest of us to say, "Oh well, you're
there, Mr. Gergen."
I'm sorry, nobody sets policy in there. We try to be gentlemen, and obviously, you don't belong there.
Weaving spiders come out here.
There you go. He said we are trying to be gentlemen.
That is
a
three-pointer.
You don't belong there.
Woo! Boy, I hit the hot button. Mr. Gergen, have a wonderful life. Say hi to Moloch for me.
Moloch.
Canaanite deity. And I'll see you at Eyes Wide Shut, baby. Bye-bye. Get his face. Get his face. Get his face. Get his face. Get in there and get his face.
Great shot of his face.
David Gergen.
David Gergen says that we're angry?
The real wild card here are the demonstrators. We just don't know where this is going to go. While they were peaceful today, there's a lot more anger among those demonstrators than is evident. You talk to them today, they're pretty angry people. So that's the big wild card.
Clearly
Thank you. And goodbye.
He had an understanding, and he violated
It's none of your
it.
damn business. It's none of your damn business.
Oh.
That's right. Listen.
Dude,
listen.
he don't fuck around,
Just
man.
look
He's
at him.
direct.
That's a face keeping a lot of secrets. He's got some stories to tell.
I don't care for his
And remember that
hairstyle,
Washington
though.
Times article? It talked about all the other organizations that he resigned from. It mentions the Trilateral Commission, the Council on Foreign Relations, all of them groups dedicated to setting up a world government and destroying American sovereignty.
And running around.
You're looking at
naked in the
video that I
woods.
personally shot during the cremation of care ritual held at Bohemian Grove.
To me, that would
My
be
documentary
one of the real
film,
benefits
Dark
of
Secrets
being a
Inside Bohemian
member,
Grove,
if you could run around
details
naked.
how world leaders from across the planet meet every July and actually engage in mock human sacrifices to the Canaanite deity Moloch. They bring a bound body in an effigy of a child and sacrifice it to the idol. And incredibly, most of those in attendance are our supposed Christian conservative
the VOD of us
leaders.
watching it is available on the YouTube channel.
Here's a video still I shot while I was inside of the encampment.
And I'm currently reading
You see
the
a
book
human skull
written
in
by
effigy.
one of the British journalists.
And let's look at that deity they
So when I
worship,
finish
Moloch,
that, I might-
a Semitic deity
I might
mentioned
talk
in the
about that.
Bible, whose worship was marked by the human
They
sacrifice of
trace all
children.
this back to like Waco.
Since we blew their cover in 2000, the Grove's gone public to a certain extent. They released this photo of a 1915 ritual. Here you have the hooded figure over the mock sacrifice. And here's a simulated hanging from 1908. In this picture, you see a photo from 1909 with what looks like public officials in attendance. A black boy
Good.
is
I mean, I still
tied down to
I
some
post a
type
lot
of
of,
table, and around him we see people
movie
in
reviews
strange
and stuff.
garb. I'll leave it to you to figure out what they're doing. In 2004, the Grove released this photo from 1934
Naked stream?
of
I don't know
members
if I
in
can do that.
hoods. The Canaanite deity Moloch was worshipped in Greece, Babylon, and then later in Europe. It is normally symbolized by a
He's
bull
really
or an
obsessed with
owl
Moloch.
or some type of horned beast, and children are sacrificed to it. It is the precursor of all modern death cults. I was able to get out of the cult compound with this program cover from the Cremation of Care. And right on the front, where a child would be burned, they had photoshopped in the image of a skeleton burning in the flames. What purpose does this all serve? Having
Oh boy,
world
that was a
leaders
real wild,
congregate and engage in an ancient
rabbit hole.
Canaanite ritual of mock child sacrifice. It's a way of binding them together, whether it's George Herbert Walker Bush or Henry Kissinger or Ronald Reagan or Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan, who's been a member since 1984.
Which, by the way,
it's
he's
about
saying
bringing
that
them
it's such a
together.
secret
Nowhere is
society,
the
yet they
origin of the
gave him
cult more
a
in
nice,
evidence than in
you
former
know,
German Chancellor Helmut Schmidt's own
professionally
autobiography, Men in
slick,
Power,
glossy
a political
program
retrospect.
full of information
He talks
and
about how they
photos
have
and then gave
their
it
own
to him.
German groves where
Like,
they
what
do
the
these
hell?
rituals, these quote druidic rituals. But he says his favorite place to do the rituals is at Bohemian Grove. This is a book that you can get at the library written by him. He talks about the Trilateral Commission, the CFR, the Bilderberg Group, and world government.
Bilderberg.
And he says that much of the decisions are made at the Bohemian Grove.
The
We were
Bilderberg
able to obtain the
drinking game
internal
wouldn't do
annals
so
of the
good in this
Bohemian Grove
documentary.
from
Typically, he likes to
1987 to
talk about 'em a lot.
1996, a publication only given to members. And in it, we see pictures of George W. Bush and his father, Newt Gingrich. We see all of these different famous individuals there at the Grove. Walter Cronkite, Jimmy Carter, Jack Kemp, Richard Milhouse Nixon. The list goes on and on. If you're still doubting reality, here is a November 1989 issue of Spy magazine. The Grove released photos of themselves dancing around dressed like women. And in the article, they admit that they do mock human sacrifices. The article went on to show artist renditions
cares?
of the Moloch idol,
What the fuck?
as
Who
well as
cares?
discussing how they bus in male prostitutes and how AIDS was a big problem. Then a New York Post article
who
in
cares
July
if they
of
wanna
2004
have a mock
reported how a
sacrifice?
top
Big
gay
deal. That's-
porn
people
star
do that all the
serviced
time.
the
Burning
moguls
Man,
at the Bohemian Grove.
Like when
This
you burn
1914
the other,
Bohemian
like
Grove
an
owl
opposing
has a
school's
swastika on its
mascot
cover.
in effigy
And
or
inside
whatever.
it talks about how they're a German death cult founded by the
Well,
Illuminati.
Jimmy Carter is still alive.
But some of
because
you are
the
saying, wait a
Bohemian
minute,
Grove.
the
He-
Nazis
because of
invented the
his pact with
swastika.
Moloch.
That was their symbol. You're talking about 1914 and 1920. My friends, the swastika was used by the Buddhists. It was used by Native Americans. It is a sun symbol. And it was used by Druids in Europe thousands of years ago. In the 1920s and 30s in the U.S., it was a symbol of good luck, like a horseshoe. But for the Nazis and members of the Bohemian Grove, it was a symbol of power.
I mean, like,
and Adolf Hitler
I
was
guess if
obsessed
you're
with
making
the
a
occult.
case that you should,
The roots of Nazi Germany
that, like,
grew out
it's-
of groups
it
like
should
the
be,
Thule and Thule Society,
like freely
organizations
used,
obsessed with
or
black
what?
magic, which themselves sprung from older organizations like the Illuminati. All of these groups corresponded and called
I
themselves
like how he
Orders of the
pronounced
Death Star.
Illuminati.
Adolf Hitler was a member of the Thule Society. Here you see one of their publication covers from 1919. He took their symbol as the signet of his party. It has been reported that after Madame Blavatsky died, Aleister Crowley became the head of the German Illuminati, also known as the OTO.
Why does he pronounce it like
Aleister
that?
Crowley was called the most evil man alive because of the bloodthirsty rituals he engaged in. It's important to note that both of his children died in questionable circumstances. So should we be surprised that the leader of the Third Reich, who killed millions of people, was an adherent of both of these sickening individuals? The Waffen-SS were the henchmen of the Nazi Party, and they wore an aluminum or silver death's head on their hats. Here you have a famous field marshal of World War I, and adorning his headdress is a death's head. In reality, all of Hitler's actions were nothing more than a manifestation of the deepest and darkest dreams of the Order of Death. And remember that the Order of Skull and Bones of Bohemian Grove are nothing more than offshoots of this global movement. The Nazis wore a skull and crossbones on their hats. Compare that to the skull and bones symbol. And beneath that, an early Nazi party medal, not just with a swastika, but the 32 or 322 of skull and bones. We see these symbols throughout Nazi culture, especially on their icons and standards.
How did it?
Hitler believed that they drew power from these symbols.
What happened?
And he publicly talked about it.
What happened?
Here is an official photo taken from the Presidential Library of George Herbert Walker Bush, showing him standing with his classmates. And there it is, the Order of Death symbol, the skull and crossbones with 322 beneath it. Would it surprise you to know that one of the chief members of Bohemian Grove, Thomas Watson, was also an adherent of Adolf Hitler's ideology, and that international business machines were integral in controlling the death camps? IBM was absolutely essential in assisting Hitler in numbering and exterminating the Jews and other undesirables.
I feel like Alex
The famous
Jones
tattoos on Jews' arms were international business machine numbers that were entered into the computers. The computers would then decide how long to keep someone alive and how hard they could be worked according to height and body weight as well as age. Here's a photo of Mr. Watson with Adolf Hitler in the late 1930s. It's not a coincidence that today IBM is the backbone of national ID card technology in the United States and across the world. Ford and General Motors were also involved in the Nazi war machine right through the war, and not one of these robber baron industrialists was ever prosecuted. Here is the international business machine that calculated the deaths of millions.
It is true that they
the modern Olympic symbols have nothing to do with Greece. They were drawn and designed by Adolf Hitler, and we still use them
but
today.
I don't know when they would cease
The Order of the
working
Death
with them.
said symbols are all around us, but the general public is too blind to see it. Now we will explore how the American branch of the Illuminati aided and abetted Adolf Hitler, and how the Bushes were the first family when it came to treason.
I've been an investigative reporter and a journalist for 35 years. I've worked in every major media market in the United States, and I've written for more than 100 newspapers and magazines nationally and internationally. So last September 17th, I became the first journalist in U.S. history to go to the U.S. National Archives and the Library of Congress and pore over the thousands of pages of documents in both places to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt or any refutation of the facts that Prescott Bush, the grandfather of George W. Bush, and George Herbert Walker, his maternal great-grandfather for whom his daddy is named, were Nazi traitors to the country who should have been tried for treason. 2 weeks ago, in early August, a major world newspaper, The Guardian of London, finally got on the story internationally, and they flew a renowned reporter of theirs named Duncan Campbell over to Washington to take me back to the archives and Library of Congress so that they could verify that these explosive documents were real and I didn't have forged copies. Prescott Bush was the grandfather of George W. Bush and the father of George Herbert Walker Bush, and George Herbert Walker Bush is named for his father-in-law, George Herbert Walker. Prescott Bush graduated from Yale in 1917 and was in Skull and Bones with E. Roland Harriman, who was the younger brother of W. Averill Harriman. The Bush family really had nothing going. They were essentially social climbers and opportunistic people. At the time that Prescott Bush met Dorothy Walker, he was a tire salesman.
They had nothing going on.
And George Herbert Walker, as all fathers do when their daughter's going to marry someone, said in his heart, you know, it's not an appropriate thing socially that my daughter marry a tire salesman. So he brought Prescott Bush first into Brown Brothers Harriman and then Union Banking Corporation. Wow. In actuality, it was anything but a bank. It was essentially a Nazi money laundering operation that had a lot of tentacles into a lot of different other businesses. They owned a shipping line called Hamburg American Line, for example, which was the first Nazi front business seized, although the line was no longer operational in 1942. In the early 1930s, it transported Nazi spies into the U.S., and then their promotional ads offered cash rewards to any American citizens who would go back on Hamburg American lines and proselytize for Hitler. 8 months after the U.S. had entered the war, the New York Herald Tribune ran a front-page article, "Hitler's Angel has $3 million in U.S. bank." And it caused a major scandal and just rocked the world of politics. Brown Brothers Harriman, which George Herbert Walker and Prescott Bush were affiliated with and partners in, worked with I.G. Farben, which operated Auschwitz. Prescott Bush, he did a number of things that were not only anti-American, but were pro-Hitler, and he did all that he could to proselytize for Hitler and the rise of his Third Reich, because the largest client, Fritz Thiessen, of his patron, W. Averill Harriman, dictated what kind of behavior he would practice to enhance his own career. So he was put on the board of directors of Union Banking Corporation, and he was also a shareholder in Union Banking Corporation along with E. Roland Harriman. But what's interesting about what the documents show is that they clearly state that all of the shareholders were phantom shareholders for Fritz Thiessen and did his bidding directly. So the point I'm making is it's not as if they bought these shares of stock as a passive investment to hopefully profit from the war. They were directly doing the bidding of the individual who built the Nazi war machine.
This is
some very shocking documents that I saw at the Library of Congress 2 weeks ago on August 10th.
His voice is so strange.
On August 9th, excuse me. Had to do with the hearings of the McCormick-Dickstein Committee of November 1934. Show that Prescott Bush and the DuPont family, the Remington family, and J.P. Morgan tried to overthrow the U.S. government, assassinate FDR, and put a Hitler-style fascist state in place. I have in my possession testimony from the McCormick-Dickstein Committee in November of 1934 by one of the fascist plotters that they were going to follow Hitler's model exactly and impose martial law on the United States, round up unemployed people that were worthless to the economy and troublemakers and Jews and put them into internment camps. And their plan was, if necessary, to exterminate the people that could not be part of the effort. The only reason the coup attempt in 1934 didn't succeed is that they hired the wrong general to lead it, General Smedley Butler, the great Marine hero, two-time Congressional Medal of Honor winner, who worked with the plotters just long enough to be able to identify who they were and then blew the whistle on them to Congress. Incredibly, after being warned by the FBI and the Justice Department and the Treasury Department to cease and desist in their Nazi dealings, they had continued them until 1951. There had been 28 additional seizures of Nazi assets and Nazi business fronts between late 1942 and 1951, and that they had moved Nazi assets into Switzerland, Brazil, Argentina, and Panama. And they had continued to do business with their primary Nazi patron, who was Fritz Thiessen, who backed Hitler beginning in 1921 and who was the wealthiest man in Germany and a steel and coal baron who, with his partner Friedrich Flick, essentially built the Nazi war machine along with I.G. Farben. In 1951, when Fritz Thyssen died in Argentina, Union Banking Corporation was liquidated by the U.S. government, and Prescott Bush received $1.5 million for his holdings in his Nazi business, and that was the beginning of the Bush family fortune for all intents and purposes. George Bush doesn't take his philosophical foundation from the Bible or the teachings of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount. George Bush takes his inspiration from what he learned in Skull and Bones and from the Thule Society that Hitler and Goebbels and Goring cut their teeth in, Bohemian Grove, these evil organizations that perpetrate the ugly things that these criminals are doing to this country, for which they must be held accountable. Now you look at the Republican National Convention this week, and you bring in Arnold Schwarzenegger to speak last night. Schwarzenegger is the son of a Nazi. He has praised Nazis. He has praised Hitler. He talked last night in terms like, we will not falter, we will not waver, we will win this war on terror.
He's a leader who doesn't flinch, who doesn't waver, and does not back down.
Well, that's exactly the speeches that Hitler made after the Reichstag fire. Terrorism and the homeland being under attack are precisely the issues that Hitler used to subvert everything within the German system of government. This is a criminal regime. They not only emulate Hitler, but its genesis comes from Hitler. And I defy anyone, a historian, journalist, author, anyone, to come forward and disprove my premise that you cannot differentiate Hitler's invasion of Poland in 1939 and the Reichstag fire and his attempt to dominate the world from George W. Bush's unprovoked invasion of Iraq and subversion of the Constitution through the Patriot Act after 9/11, which I submit is his Reichstag fire. Karl Rove and his minions are every bit the masters of propaganda that Joseph Goebbels was. They literally took lessons from Goebbels and Goring about how to create such brilliant propaganda that unreality can become reality, and reality can be subverted to fantasy political subterfuge right before your eyes. So there's just an endless broken record that is leading up to the present era, that the Bush family has had a single goal for 100 years, which is to become the most powerful family on the planet and to rule the world. And they are on the verge of doing that under George W. Bush. It's critical that every citizen of this country rise up and do something, because the day of reckoning is at hand, and these people are Nazis. They are practicing Nazi philosophy. They are mimicking Nazi tactics, and time is running out.
And now it's being reported that the architect of the Bush administration's policies, Karl Rove, is the grandson of Karl Rover, a Gauleiter or governor over an entire state in Nazi Germany. Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Bob Woodward, reporting on a Bush rally, said that Karl Rove likened the meeting to a Nazi rally. Now the Bush-Rove-Schwarzenegger nexus is promoting worldwide war in the name of America's safety to stop the threat of terrorism. The same secret society that funded and supported Adolf Hitler is now supporting a move towards world government.
American Dad,
and Karl Rove is out there on point, pushing Arnold Schwarzenegger for president.
Today. We don't know what to make of the fact that he seemed to be somewhat part of the winner's circle, do we? We don't know why he was so much in evidence today.
Well, he's the Republican governor of the most populous state in the Union, who is very supportive. He's an old friend of 41's.
The San Francisco Chronicle reported the decision to have Arnold run was made by Rove at the Bohemian Grove. You've got to hand it to the political wizards. Tens of thousands of Republicans at the RNC praising and chanting for a man who's for open borders and rabidly against the Second Amendment. But they've been told to worship him, so they are. This isn't the first time we've been fooled by foreign usurpers. There was another interesting meeting in Madison Square Garden back in February of 1939 by the Bund, or the American Nazi Party. At the very same venue where Bush and Schwarzenegger gave their speeches in 2004, the American Nazi Party promoted the vision of Adolf Hitler. In fact, the Nazi Party in America was very, very popular. the people hadn't yet seen the danger. Because while the American people slept, Nazi agents like Prescott Bush were working overtime for the right. And Arnold's father, Gustav Schwarzenegger, was busy too, volunteering for the Nazi Party in Austria when it was illegal and becoming an SS officer. And Karl Rove, reportedly his grandfather, again, was a Gauleiter, or a governor, over an entire German state.
So, reportedly.
You all have heard of me through the Jewish-controlled press as a creature with horns, a cloven hoof, and a long tail. If you ask what we are actively fighting for under our charter, I will here repeat the declaration I made public some time ago. First, a social, just, white, Gentile-ruled United States. Second,
all the American Nazis talked about was how much they loved America, how pro-USA they were. And a lot of the public bought it. And the fathers and grandfathers of the men who run our country today were in full support of the Bund. It's now the 21st century, and things have gotten a lot slicker. The question is, will the public buy it?
California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Thank you.
Did I wake up in the middle of a Twilight Zone or Outer Limits episode? The American people cheering and chanting the name of someone whose homeland is Austria and who openly talks about being a dictator all the time?
Thank you very much. Thank you. What a greeting.
Arnold wants to be our leader, our Fuhrer. And as American citizens, we have a right to expose him. And that's what we're about to do. From CBS's 60 Minutes to NBC's Meet the Press, Arnold has been all over the airwaves, pushing for amending the Constitution so he can run for president. High-level members of his gubernatorial campaign have now started a national movement to repeal Article 2, Clause 5 of the U.S. Constitution that blocks foreign-born from the presidency. In November of 2004, former President George Herbert Walker Bush gave Schwarzenegger the George Bush Award at his presidential library in College Station, Texas. And he told the crowd, don't bet against Arnold Schwarzenegger. There's a good chance he's going to end up being our president. Arnold Schwarzenegger positioned himself into the Kennedy family by marrying Maria Shriver.
My Lord.
And now she's out shilling for him, but saying, it's for other foreigners, not for my husband. Change it for everybody. It's fair. Just trust me. For well over a year, every day they're in the newspapers or on television, pushing to change the Constitution. And now Schwarzenegger, in an authorized biography, has told the Kennedy biographer that yes, there is a secret plan to put him into the White House. And the powerful head of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Orrin Hatch, has introduced what is called the Arnold Bill. There are 3 other pieces of legislation introduced by other congressmen like Dana Rohrabacher in the House. They just continue pushing and pushing and pushing, despite the fact that in major polls, 80+% of Americans are against changing the Constitution for Schwarzenegger.
What is he talking
But we've got to take the threat seriously.
Come on,
because after a year of propaganda, the numbers have dropped to 65% being against it. And then you have to ask yourself, what will those numbers be in 4 years? The elite love Arnold Schwarzenegger because he has an international appeal, and they've been very carefully grooming him for his role as American president inside the New World Order. That's why we've launched Americans Against Arnold and the website arnoldexposed.com in a desperate attempt to stop this foreign usurper.
What am I doing?
Efforts by supporters of California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger to change the United States Constitution are not sitting well with the Texas radio host. Alex Jones claims he raised $5,000 in just 2 hours to combat the campaign for a constitutional amendment to make non-native citizens eligible to serve as president. Jones says he will run TV ads in Austin, Texas and Sacramento, California, opposing the amendment drive.
Now let's look at the men who hold the strings connected to the marionette. Here are two different San Francisco Chronicle articles revealing that it was Karl Rove at Bohemian Grove that set the strategy for Arnold's successful gubernatorial win. An article in the Scotsman newspaper in September of 2002 openly showed Arnold Schwarzenegger with Warren Buffett and Lord Rothschild and said they were there meeting at the Rothschild Castle to discuss business strategies. In the article, they talked about how he was lining up his run for U.S. president a year before he ran for governor. In the middle of the Enron-engineered California energy crisis, Arnold met secretly with Michael Milken, the junk bond dealer, and Kenneth Lay at a Beverly Hills hotel. The federal government has now released documents from the event. And guess what they were doing at the meeting? Discussing how to cover up Enron's culpability. Arnold ran for governor, promising that he wouldn't take special interest money. Guess what? He's broken all previous records for taking corporate money. Like other famous Austrians we can think of, Arnold is obsessed with being king of the world. He's told friends, family, newspapers, magazines, over and over again that he wants to be ruler of the world, that he dreams of being a dictator, that he wants to be worshipped at a Nuremberg-style rally like Hitler. Rolling Stone reported on it in the 70s. The London Guardian and CNN in 2003 both reported how he told friends and family of a recurring dream where he walks the earth as our ruler, and of a 50-year plan he had as a young man to become world ruler. In 1990, he told U.S. News and World Report, "My relationship to power and authority is that I'm all for it. People need somebody to watch over them. 95% of the people in the world need to be told what to do and how to behave." Following in the footsteps of dictators before him, Arnold loves to be seen with giant images of himself behind him. The cult of personality concept in politicians is totally alien to America's history, but it's second nature to people like Kim Jong-il, dictator of North Korea, and ousted dictator Saddam Hussein of Iraq. It was pioneered by Alexander the Great and used to great effect by the Roman emperors. Hitler and Stalin just loved it because it made the people feel insignificant. In the dystopic novel 1984, huge portraits of Big Brother stare down on the slaves. But after all, Arnold's just going with the times. Now across the United States, we've seen these giant billboards with George Bush's picture on it, paid for by his supporters, that say, "George Bush, our leader." President Bush has done something that no American president has ever done. He likes to prance around in military uniforms, reminding us of where his power comes from. We should all be concerned that our president is dressing like Saddam Hussein, Fidel Castro, Mao Zedong, and Adolf Hitler. And Bush loves to be seen in uniform with lots of troops behind him.
Man,
but so does Arnold.
Outrageous.
Here is Schwarzenegger giving the fascist salute in one of his bodybuilding poses. A trick the pro-Schwarzenegger press likes to play on the people is to focus on his father and then go, well, he can't help it if his father was an SS officer. What they don't like to focus in on is Nazi war criminal Kurt Waldheim, who was Secretary General of the United Nations. At his wedding to Maria Shriver in 1986, in front of a massive press in attendance, he said the following: "My friends don't want me to mention Kurt's name because of all the recent Nazi stuff and the UN controversy, but I love him, and Maria does too, and so thank you, Kurt." Here's a photo of Arnold Schwarzenegger with Kurt Waldheim in Austria in 1999. Kurt Waldheim was an elite Nazi as well, an officer in the SS. He hunted down American soldiers in Serbia and killed them. An article in '92 in Spy magazine reported on how Arnold liked to give away recordings of Adolf Hitler to friends in California. It also reported on how he loved to give the Sieg Heil salute. Former Mr. Universe Rick Wayne went public and talked about how Arnold loved to call black people the N-word and said they couldn't run or do anything, and how he went on to say that blacks were basically worthless to society. A second champion black bodybuilder, Robbie Robinson, went public, and in his testimony, He talked about a public event in front of thousands of people where Arnold in 1978 began screaming, "Down with the N-words, down with the blacks, subhuman, you people can't run the country." He goes on and on, but the mainstream media ignores it.
Now,
Arnold's barbaric treatment of women is legendary, and he's publicly apologized for it. The reason this is so important is it shows a total lack of control. He's a wild man.
I don't think
More
anybody
important
views
is his
him
love
as like
of domination.
at
He
all.
loves to degrade underlings.
He's acting like
Arnold
he
has
was
never
just
challenged a
universally loved, and I don't
2001
think that's
Premier
true at all.
magazine article where he reportedly makes unattractive members on set get on their knees and call themselves ugly dogs. He reportedly revels in humiliating people until they cry. Not
Who was
only
the
is he
lady
a
that
man
said she was
after
working
the
with some
elite's
big
own
celebrity
heart,
and the
loving to dehumanize,
person farted
he's
in her
totally
face?
compromised. If we know about all of these
I'm gonna look it up. That couldn't have been.
imagine how many are still
That couldn't
in the
have been
closet.
Arnold. I'll lose it if
In
it
a
was
sit-down
Arnold.
interview Arnold gave We Magazine, he talked about drug use and sex orgies. The elite just loves that. Total control over their puppet. Then there's all the publicly available gay porn. That's right. In gay porno mags,
Oh my God,
Arnold's
it
done
is.
some spreads. But on top of it, there's
Miriam
the private
Margolis, a
collections
British
of
Australian
people like
actress,
Robert
claims that
Mapplethorpe,
Arnold
who was a
Schwarzenegger
pioneer
deliberately farted
in
in her face
hardcore
while filming the
homosexual pornography.
1999
One of the biggest
biblical
problems
horror
in
movie
Arnold's
End of Days.
portfolio of horrors is his admitted
Margolis
use of
said that
anabolic
Schwarzenegger
steroids.
farted in her face
Anabolic
after she
steroids,
farted next to
especially
him
heavy
on
use,
set.
can permanently
She also
change
said that he did it
one's
because he didn't
psychological
like her. So
makeup. He's also been a poster child for
farts,
steroid use.
and then out
It has
of
been a
anger
ravage
at her
on
fart,
the youth
he
of America.
rips ass
But
right in her
being a
face.
bad role
That's-
model is nothing compared to the psychological effects that include mania, roid rage,
that a
extreme
retaliatory
aggression, delusions
fart,
of
or
grandeur.
was that
This
just
is what
a
testosterone and its derivatives
balancing
cause.
the accounts?
It's in the medical handbooks. So let's look at this again. An individual who says he wants to be a dictator, who reportedly hands out recordings of Adolf Hitler's speeches, who openly promotes admitted Nazis like Kurt Waldheim after they're exposed as Nazis and doesn't apologize about it, now wants to be our president. And he's taken a drug that can permanently alter the chemistry of the brain, making you domineering and aggressive and
within the
delusional.
social
We're
contract
talking
have
about
the
Arnold
right
Alois Schwarzenegger being
return
positioned to
fire?
be president
And if so,
of the United States,
if she
in
just
control
farted,
of all of
but
our
he
military
farted
forces.
specifically in
Think
her
about
face,
this
is that an
compromised individual
over-escalation?
in control of our
Is he
B-2
abusing
bombers,
his
our
superior
nuclear
star power
submarines,
to get
our
away with
nuclear missiles,
escalating
our Air
the
Force, our
fart
Army,
situation?
our Navy, everything. You put that together with the police in black uniforms, the ski mask, the Patriot Act. It's a nightmare. And we have the very same elite that tried to bring Hitler to power now pushing Schwarzenegger. It's up to you, America. You better research these facts for yourself
this second
and
half
take
had
action
anything to
to
do with
defend our
9/11?
republic from enemies foreign
I feel like
and
I
domestic.
blacked out and woke up
In
and
the
it's a
battle
different
for our
documentary.
liberties and freedoms and our children's future, it's going to be reality, not illusion, is going to save this country. If we believe the propaganda and the slick packaging, we are going to go into the Fourth Reich of the New World Order. Schwarzenegger and his controllers are counting on you to not take
Like, he
action,
really
to not
believes that
inform
Arnold
yourself and others,
Schwarzenegger is this
to not stand
unbelievably
up
powerful
against this
person, and
insane
that's- I
action
never felt
they're
like
taking
that was
against
true.
us,
Did you? Even
trying
when
to
he
put
was
some
governor, I
foreigner from
never-
Austria who says he wants to be a dictator and in control of this country.
And in spite of the attack on our homeland,
Listen to how he speaks using his voice into a microphone.
on our
just
homeland,
like
on our
Adolf
homeland, on our homeland.
He said
Schwarzenegger has the
homeland,
nerve
folks.
to call America his homeland. By definition, your homeland is the country where you
It
were
felt
born.
like it
That
felt
country
that way,
for
definitely,
you,
like,
Arnold,
like the tape got
is
switched.
Austria, of the Black Eagle and Lederhosen, where your father was an SS officer, where your mother, when he died, married another top SS officer. That's your homeland. Your homeland is the birthplace of Adolf Hitler, and America will never be your homeland. Your claim of America as your homeland is as false as everything else you do.
Should I put?
Then Arnold went into a very revealing diatribe.
Alex Jones
talked about
versus
the police
Arnold
state
or Alex
in
Jones?
Austria,
I feel like it's
a
more
police
about
state his
Arnold
father
at this
helped
point
set
than the
up.
phony Texans.
The problem is America's turning into that very police state. It's a mirror image.
When I was a boy, the Soviets occupied part of Austria. I saw their tanks in the streets. I saw communism with my own eyes. I remember the fear we had when we had to cross into the Soviet sector. Growing up, we were told, don't look the soldiers in the eye, just look straight ahead. It was common belief that the Soviet soldiers could take a man out of his own car and ship him back to the Soviet Union as slave labor. Now, my family didn't have a car, but one day we were in my uncle's car. It was near dark as we came to the Soviet checkpoint. I was a little boy. I was not an action hero back then. But I remember how scared I was that the soldiers would pull my father or my uncle out of the car and I would never see them again. My family and so many others lived in fear of the Soviet boot.
Well, Arnold, now America imprisons more people than any other country on the face of the earth. And American children grow up in the high-tech police state your masters have built. After winning the rigged election against his cousin John Kerry, Bush said that he had political capital. He went on to explain that meant he could do whatever he wanted to.
Look at the number of uniformed personnel, all of them armed. It's estimated there are 60,000 armed and uniformed members of law enforcement here. Roughly one police officer or soldier tasked to this duty
that just
per
felt
every
like
4
really
or 5 spectators, the highest ratio in history.
Like strange that he was so fixated on Arnold.
Chris, the last couple of days, Brian and I were talking about it. It was close to an armed camp.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, George
Secret.
Bush, and First Lady Laura Bush. Wave to them. Let them know that you love America.
Administer the presidential oath of office.
How long is this documentary?
Lord Bush went on to give an oath that he would protect and defend the Constitution.
Oh my God.
When all he's been doing is trying to dismantle it. His new Attorney General, Alberto Gonzales, has said publicly that President Bush is above the law, above the Constitution, a dictator.
He did seem to have...
You raise your right hand, Mr. President, and repeat after me. I, George Walker Bush.
I, George Walker Bush.
Do solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear.
That I will faithfully execute.
That I will faithfully execute.
The office of President of the United States.
The office of President of the United States.
And will to the best of my ability.
And will to the best of my ability.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
So let's look at what Bush has actually done to the Constitution and Bill of Rights since getting into office. He passed Patriot Act 1 that dismantles at least 7 of the first 10 amendments. And under Section 802, all Americans are defined as terrorists. Under Section 802, the new definition of terrorism is redefined as acts that are dangerous to human life that violate any federal or state law. And when Bush talks about reauthorizing the Patriot Act, that's code for passing Patriot Act 2. Under the Patriot Act, Homeland Security has visited toy stores over possible trademark infringement. An Army doctor who complained too much was arrested by Homeland Security. Topless bars, zoning disputes, pot dealers. It's all under the Patriot Act. And starting in 2005, all new passports are digitally tracked by an RFID chip. It's easy to get in, but hard to get out. And before he left office, Homeland Security Chief Tom Ridge called for a world ID card. In late 2004, Bush successfully got the Congress to pass a national ID card, craftily hidden in state driver's license under federal standardization. Bush told conservatives that it would stop illegal immigration. There's
Paul.
nothing in the bill concerning immigration other than the fact that it actually orders the states to accept consular matriculas issued by foreign nations, so it actually makes it easier to get into the country. The bill even talks about it being used as an internal passport at checkpoints. Bush also successfully rammed through the Orwellian-named New Freedom Initiative. This forces every child in America from age 5 to 18 to be psychologically tested twice a year, whether you're homeschooled, private schooled, or public schooled. The guidelines for mental illness were written by a consortium of drug companies, and in their own internal documents, they bragged that they'll go from 15% of American children on psychotropic drugs and Ritalin to over 50%. The law states that without parental consent, while your child is at school, they will be forcibly tested. And Illinois is already jumping ahead. They're saying they're going to start forcibly testing all pregnant women. This is the type of nightmare that only Joseph Stalin could dream of. But our government is making it a reality. But if you look at foster children in America, over 2/3 of them are on psychotropic drugs. That's what happens when the state has control. 2/3 on drugs. Well, I guess that's the new freedom. The federal government has spent billions and billions of dollars putting up cameras across the nation, except for our borders. I have seen over 50 mainstream reports where video cameras are put in school bathrooms and showers. And when the schools get caught doing it, they say it's for your safety. And now the establishment just throws it in our face.
Gosh.
Prepare to be scanned. We track you with your cell phones. We're putting cameras up on the street corners that read all your license plates and track everywhere you go. And we're going to tax you with these new cameras. We're going to put satellite tracker boxes in all your cars and transponders. We're going to tax you by the mile. This is just the way it is. So get used to it.
Unless they want it to.
Oh, and 8 years ago, we started putting black boxes in all the new cars that track everything you do as well.
Like they don't
and now
use
industry and the federal government are just calmly saying that soon all new cars will have a camera in them that scan your face as you drive and instantly report back to the police department if you're driving while you're tired or if you're arguing with your wife. Under a new sales tax system being prepared that will be implemented to the national ID card, you'll have to thumb scan when you buy and sell. And the face scanning cameras we mentioned will keep track of you not just in your car, but as you walk down the street. Almost every federal, state, and local road in the country will be satellite and transponder tracked. We already mentioned that earlier. And when Californians heard about Governor Schwarzenegger's program, they got very upset, and over 90% of them were against it in polls. The governor just said, I don't care what you want, we're going to do this. It's going to take the average tax by the mile from 25 cents at the state level to over $3. Read it for yourself. It's the official news reports. Similar plans are being pushed by the feds in all 50 states. But that's just the financial hardship.
Oh, yeah.
There'll no longer be any open road. Everything you do will be tracked, chronicled, and traced. Whether it's a large highway or a rural road, everywhere you go will be chronicled. And in middle schools across the country, students are having to wear RFID tags around their necks, tracking and training them how to be good little prisoners. And now hospitals are openly discussing making their patients take implantable microchips. Bars in the United States and Europe make their patrons take chips before they can enter the VIP sections. And now the Mexican Attorney General has forced over 160 of his deputies to take implantable microchips if they want to work in his office.
I, Richard Cheney, do solemnly swear.
I, Richard Cheney, do solemnly swear.
That I will defend and support the Constitution of the United States.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
It's no wonder that Speaker of the House Dennis Hastert stumbled over the oath as he read it. He's not stupid. He knows that a textbook dictatorship is being set up in America, complete with shadow government that can take control of Congress. Oh yes, now Congress has given its authority up to an unbridled executive branch.
Yeah,
There have been other cryptic statements. The outgoing head of CENTCOM, General Tommy Franks, told Cigar Aficionado that if America is attacked by terrorists again, we'll have to suspend the Constitution in favor of a military form of government, or martial law. It's abhorrent to American values to have the military involved in any way in civilian life, especially in law enforcement. It's been a staple of Communist China and Nazi Germany, Soviet Russia, and Cuba today, but not America. Why are we following every telltale sign of a police state? We're dealing with a group of predators, an elite that sees us as cattle, as their slaves. They want to train us to be predators like they are, to join them in their quest for world empire,
this was almost
to
20
be their
years
cannon
ago.
fodder. Just look at the torture they've been promoting on television and in movies, and then we watch as it manifests itself in the real world, in Iraq and Guantanamo Bay. What we're witnessing is the construction of a worldwide dictatorship. But to get it done, they have to be able to manipulate us into going along with it. They're confident that you won't wake up till it's too late.
They're
The
confident
good news
that you
is
won't
people
send
are
me a
waking
check
up
for
in
$19.99
record numbers.
plus shipping and
The
handling.
question is, now that you know the secret, now that you understand the inner workings of the New World Order, will you take action to wake others up and stand up against this Fourth Reich of the elite? The globalists have America and Europe in their grasp today, but tomorrow they want the world.
Wow. Well, that was not martial law 9/11 Rise of the Police State by Alex Jones and InfoWars production. What a story. Wow.